Wishtree, Chapter 41. Morning emerged slowly, heavy with clouds, meaning it came about kind of slow. A light rain had fallen just before dawn, soothing my leaves, if not my mood. Oddly, the ground felt saturated, so wet. Spring was always muddy, of course, but this was unusual. It would make for a messy wishing day tomorrow. An early rising old gentleman with a bamboo cane approached. He paused and attached a small piece of blue paper to my lowest branch, using a bit of twine. He didn't say his wish aloud, so I couldn't tell what it was, but he had a satisfied smile as he stepped carefully through the soggy grass. No doubt I'd be seeing more wishes today. Many people came early to grab an easy-to-reach spot. This would probably be my last wishing day. How could it be that my first one, that long ago with Maeve, still seemed as fresh in my heart as my conversation with Stephen and Samar from the previous night? A car slowed to a crawl near the curb. I saw an arm, a blur, and then splat. Something hit my trunk. Uh-oh. Splat, splat. 2 more times, and the car roared off with the screech of tires. Oh, Bongo was the first to report on the damage. What do you think they threw? Raw eggs, she said. I'm assuming that didn't hurt. Didn't feel a thing, I said. Fresh baked bread, hairy spiders, and Big U ventured out to inspect the situation. Big U slipped under the police tape and licked one of the yolks sliding down my trunk. She murmured, raw, just the way I like them. Hey, Big, share the wealth, Hairy Spider snapped as she and Fresh joined her. Agnes watched from her perch. I much prefer a squirming mouse pup, she said. It's all yours, ladies. Remember, Agnes is the owl. What a nice surprise, Big U said between slurps. This is not nice, Bongo said. This is people at their worst. Still, said Hairy Spiders, licking her paws, it'd be a shame to let a perfectly good egg goo go to waste. One creature's nastiness is another creature's nibble. Big U gave a satisfied burp and the animals scampered back to their homes. The door to Stephen's house opened. He walked over to me, saw the eggshells scattered like puzzle pieces, and scowled. Samar was next, a backpack slung over her shoulder and books clutched to her chest. She leaped over a muddy puddle, and joined Stephen. They're walking to school together. Jerks, he muttered, gesturing toward the egg remains. Sorry, Samar. But Samar held up her hand. Stephen, she said in a low voice, last night? Stephen nodded ever so slightly. Their eyes locked on me. Last night, he repeated, as if they were speaking in code. The tree? The tree. You heard what I heard? Samar asked. I did. Samar looked right at Stephen. You heard the tree? Samar gave a little nod. So it was maybe a trick? Somebody playing a joke on us? Or maybe we were both sleepwalking at the same moment, Stephen suggested. He nodded as if trying to convince himself. Yeah, sleepwalking. Have you ever sleptwalked before? No, but there's a first time for everything. They stood there looking at me expectantly, willing me to speak. At least that's how it felt. I stayed silent. I said my piece, and I regretted it. Stephen, Samar said softly, whatever happens, we can't tell a soul about this deal. Deal, meaning they agreed to not tell anybody. Ever. Samar sighed. People would say that we're crazy. And they'd probably be right, said Stephen. Samar jutted her chin at me. Tree, do you have anything to add? Which is funny, she's talking right to Red. I didn't say a word. Samar and Stephen shared a smile. Figure it was worth the shot, she said. They headed off to school together. Stephen's father came out on the porch. He was holding a cup of coffee. He caught sight of Stephen and Samar and frowned. A moment later, Samar's mother stepped out of the blue house, her keys jangling, a briefcase over her shoulder. She followed the neighbor's gaze, meaning she watched as the neighbor watched her. Both parents watched in silence until Stephen and Samar, walking side by side, disappeared from view. Oh, so the neighbor was looking, so she followed where the neighbor was looking and then watched them too. Chapter 42. I didn't have much time to mull over my mistake, so to think about his mistake, we had a steady stream of visitors as the hours passed. Early wishmakers came throughout the day, a little girl who wanted 20 hamsters, a grocer down the street, hoping for a summer of sweet peaches, the usual. The local reporter returned. She peeked at some of the new wishes hanging from my bows and took a photo of the broken eggshells on my trunk. Sandy and Max came to remove the police tape surrounding me. Remember, those were the police officers. Francesca joined them. Today, she had Lewis and Clark on thin leather leashes. So remember, Lewis and Clark are the cats that like to climb red. Each cat was wearing an embarrassingly sparkly harness. So harness would be like what goes around the pet, and the leash is attached to it. Francesca discussed the broken eggs with Sandy and Max while Lewis and Clark wove around her legs. I've got a tree cutter coming out later to give me an estimate, Francesca said. Oh no. Tree cutter means somebody who would cut down the tree, and an estimate means the person would say, I'll cut it down for this much money. So you're definitely cutting it down, Sandy asked, in what I'd like to think was a disappointed voice. Yes, no question. See that muck? All that water in the yard? Francesca pointed at the soggy lawn. Plumber told me this dang tree is plugging up some of the pipes. Least bit of rain and the yard turns into a giant mud puddle. Still, people are going to be sorry to see it go, Max said. He reached for Clark's leash and tried to unwrap Francesca. I know, it's a good old tree, but sentiment doesn't pay the plumber, meaning, feeling good about the tree doesn't pay for the plumber to come out and fix something. Sandy grabbed Lewis while Francesca attempted to unknot herself from the leash. What about the animals and the birds that live in the tree, she asked. That's where I'm using the old noggin, Francesca said. Every year, the possums and owls and such vacate the premises on wishing day, meaning they leave on wishing day. Strangest thing, it's like they know what's coming. She hopped over the web of leashes. Suppose they don't like being disturbed. In any case, I'm hoping the cutters will come late tomorrow afternoon. Most of the wishes will be done by then. What will you do with all the wishes? Sandy asked. Put them in the trash when no one's looking? That's what I do every year. Whole thing's nonsense anyway. Max and Sandy looked at me sympathetically, like they felt bad for Red. I know. I don't have a sentimental bone in my body. Francesca paused to address the cats who were yanking her in opposite directions. If dogs can do this, why is it such a challenge for you two? Meaning if dogs can be on a leash. She turned her attention back to the police. But it's time, more than time. Well, we're going to swing by tomorrow. Keep an eye on things. No lead on the person who carved that word, but with the eggs, the people just generally riled. And the cut down, Sandy shrugged. Couldn't hurt to have us keeping an eye on things. Thanks, Francesca said. Not necessary, but I appreciate it. Lewis and Clark caught a glimpse of Bongo and lunged for my trunk. Whoa, you crazy felines, Francesca cried, reining them in, so pulling them back on the leash. They hissed at Bongo. She spread her wings menacingly and let out the most ferocious caw. Lewis and Clark retreated, so ran back for the safety of Francesca's arms. Once again, she was a tangled knot of leashes and cats. Sandy smiled. Maybe leave the cats home tomorrow, Francesca.